Howdy, and welcome back. I'm Steven, and this is FWP Reviews. It's 2021, and the new movies are not coming out as quickly as I was expecting them to. Despite this, I will go over all of the movies I watched that were newly released this month. These totaled 16 movies. I saw some good movies, some bad movies, mediocre movies, and everything in between. I'll just go in the order I watched them in for simplicity's sake. Let's get started. The first movie is Pieces of a Woman. I think this movie was very solid. There were some lulls in the pace that made the movie a bit harder to watch though, but it did maintain its solid nature despite this. The highlight of this movie was definitely Vanessa Kirby's killer performance. I think this marks Vanessa Kirby as one to keep a very, very close eye on in the future. The movie is also pushed forward by the compelling nature of the story. It takes a look at something that happens all the time in real life. It takes a grounded look at it, and it puts it into the human range of emotions. The next movie is Herself. Herself is an interesting one. It has some solid moments, and it was relatively compelling. The moments surrounding the legal battle over child custody were surprisingly the strongest of these. The way it put forth the monotony and bullshit of the system that is in place, not just in the United States, but in Europe as well, it just really effectively put that to the screen. There were a few moments towards the end that kind of just felt weirdly like a soap opera in this movie. Because of that, it really took me out of the experience. Other than that, it was average and well done in its composition. The next movie is Locked Down. Locked Down is real bad. Call me a bit confused maybe, but I am really confused as to why we are making comedy movies about an ongoing pandemic that aren't even good. I'm confused, man. If I wanted to laugh at the horrible nature of our situation, I've got memes for that. I don't need crappy movies. This movie just mostly feels ill-advised, ill-timed, and mostly just made me ill. It used buzzwords we all have learned, unfortunately, over the past year, and it triggered my fight or flight literally every minute of the movie. Would I recommend to watch it? Probably not worth it. Would I say it would make a fun drinking game out of these buzzwords? Probably still not worth it. The next movie is One Night in Miami. Regina King makes one of the best movies of the month in her movie One Night in Miami. Most of this movie's strength comes from its writing, directorial, and acting talent. It holds strong and effective conversations with the viewer and between the characters about its themes. It was pretty entertaining to watch unfold for the most part. Not to mention the performances in this movie were all just so good. What drives these kinds of movies forward are the characters, and they couldn't have picked a better group of actors to play a better group of historical figures for that. Next up is Outside the Wire, Netflix's newest action movie. I genuinely cannot believe that people walked away from this movie, having worked on it, and they got paid for a hard day's work. Absolute disbelief. This movie is what we in my hometown would call too big for its britches. Anthony Mackie's performance is fun to watch at times. Ultimately though, this movie just formed into a boring, gray, and explosive blob. It literally put me to sleep, and I never fall asleep during movies. That's saying a lot, don't you think? Next up, another Liam Neeson action movie, The Marksman. The first note for this, some good news. Liam Neeson announces that he's retiring from acting in action films at the end of this year. The bad news, though, is that this one still came out. This man has some serious talent, such as his role in Ordinary Love just last year. I think he's got so much more to give, and it's why are you doing these movies? I guess maybe he's having fun, but it doesn't seem like any fun, but it is what it is. Back to The Marksman. The Marksman is the newest one of these Neeson action films. I honestly cannot remember the gist of this movie. It was boring and uncompelling and somehow exhausting. How is a boring movie exhausting to watch? The next movie is The Ultimate Playlist of Noise. The Ultimate Playlist of Noise falls into the sappy, teenage romance, sick kid, John Green type movie. I personally have a soft spot for this kind of movie. This movie did not go in the right direction though. It was really annoying, honestly. The leads were good, but they weren't given much to work with. The story was mildly compelling, and then out of left field, we get some weird twists and turns that don't really settle right, and all of a sudden your movie kind of sucks. The ending also didn't tie any of it together, and it didn't make a lot of sense structurally. Overall, not an enjoyable experience, coming from a fan of these kinds of movies. Next up is the new documentary, Some Kind of Heaven. Some Kind of Heaven is a fascinating documentary about the largest retirement community in the United States. This community, the Villages in Central Florida. I found this to be an interesting look at an interesting place. There was a lot more cocaine involved than I expected, but it's Florida. If it was going to happen anywhere, it would have been there. They did a good job picking entertaining subjects, although I wish they had picked some different ones too to get a better mix. These were all just crazy stories, and I can't imagine everybody that lived there is living this kind of crazy story. It seems like a really neat place though, and it really captures that stylistically and tonally in the documentary. All that considered, a solid documentary. Next up, The White Tiger. For some reason, I feel like I've been hearing the title of this movie floating around on Netflix release schedules for a couple of years now. I have no evidence to back that up, and that coupled with me having literally no idea what it's about, I might have imagined it. Bear with me. In the end, when it came out, it was really interesting and entertaining. I thought it had some interesting insight into social systems in India, as well as putting them against a background of what I might call an absurd story, but ultimately it assembled a cast of good, solid, three-dimensional characters, and it was really entertaining to watch this somewhat bizarre story unfold. The next is a stage show called In and of Itself. This is the best movie that I saw this month. It's essentially a stage performance performed by the magician Derek Delgadio. It sent chills down my spine around every corner. He does a really great job bringing this kind of show to life, it seems. Frank Oz, the director, did a good job making this show work for the small screen. It stayed on one show, but at times it expanded to show us how different parts of the different shows played out, to show us how unique they were, but it also served to just give depth to the show, despite it only being one show that we're really watching. It was incredibly cohesive and interesting, and it just had me glued to my seat. Next up is Psycho Goreman. I'm still not 100% sure that Psycho Goreman was a movie that I watched and not just a figment of my imagination. This is by far one of the most chaotic movies I have seen in my entire life. In fact, I adore this movie because of that fact. It's horrific and violent, yet very entertaining, surprisingly. World building is bizarre, but it gives a solid foundation. There are a lot of incredibly well-timed jokes in this movie. Any scene that had the dad in it was just pure comedic gold. Next up is a movie about a magpie called Penguin Blue. This movie did not do it for me. This movie had some solid filmmaking elements as well as some good performances, but that couldn't save it from the that was kind of overwhelming while I was watching this movie. It was boring and unengaging for me at most points. The engaging moments that had you engaged in the movie just felt manufactured. It had a lot to give, but it didn't give a whole lot of that. The bird was cute though. Next up is a movie called Supernova. Deep cut, emotional movie with a surprising lack of exploding stars in it. Colin Firth and Stanley Tucci are pretty fucking amazing in this movie. They give heartbreakingly good performances, to be frank. This movie relied a lot on what their performances had to offer to the themes, and it worked out pretty well in this case. This movie is heartbreaking, but you guys have got to check it out. Next up is The Dig. The Dig is about digging. Now, you may be saying to yourself, Steven, a movie about digging, that doesn't sound very good. But, hear me out. Carey Mulligan and Lily James are in it. I agree. Jokes aside, this movie is well crafted but generally formulaic. It looks at an archaeological dig on a widow's estate that could change archaeological history forever. But the twist, World War II is about to start. Not good for dig. It also focuses on the relationships and the dynamics between the people that are discovering this discovery. This movie was pretty great, but it just didn't take that leap to incredible that it could have if it had taken a few risks. Next up is Palmer. Palmer sees Justin Timberlake return to the acting world, and this time he's serious. And I mean really serious. I'm pretty sure he didn't even smile in this movie. Despite this movie comes out relatively compelling. It has some pretty good themes and a pretty strong narrative. Justin Timberlake ain't too bad either, I think. Unfortunately, the movie lost a little bit of momentum and it was hard to watch at certain points. Next up is The Little Things. This movie has been called Great Value 7 by just about anybody who has watched 7. And I'm here to tell you, if my opinion matters, that it is just a Great Value 7. I implore you to skip this movie. Not just because it's bad, but because 7 is literally on HBO Max, and instead of watching Little Things, you could just watch 7. You get what I'm saying? I'm really asking you. Also, update since writing the script for this video, Jared Leto got nominated for a Golden Globe for this movie, and come on, man. You gotta be kidding me. With that, let's wrap this up. January has been up and down for movies this month. I think there were highs and lows for sure. An interesting contrast to the usual all lows of January though. This year could be something special, or it could just be another filler year until we get back to normal. Either way though, I will be here blabbing about my opinions for you guys. In case you're wondering, no, I will not make any videos on the Golden Globes because I don't even want to talk about it. I'm kind of upset. So, just gonna leave it be. We're gonna let them figure it out themselves. This is FWP Reviews signing off. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.